Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Collaborative Approach in Education. This week we will be discussing provocations.
But what is provocation? You might be asking yourself. Maybe if you have worked in a radio inspired center, you have heard this word a lot. Um, but a provocation is something that calls the children or stimulates a response or an action from them. It is an activity that is set up on tables that you make it interesting using particular materials or objects that create a context for children to explore their ideas and extend on their own interests.
Yeah, it's generally guided by the child and how they want to interact with materials. And I think where educators need a lot of support is how to set up something that is engaging. So something that actually sparks interest and something they want to come to and investigate.
Come back to as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like some of the issues that educators usually find is that they are not as creative. And, I totally get it because I'm not a creative person, but Pinterest is there for it to help us. And so is Google and all these blogs out there and YouTube. You can follow pages on Facebook too that share lots of ideas on Instagram. There's a lot of like inspirations in those places that you can actually use and try to adapt to your children's current interests. So you might find like a beautiful trough setup with ocean animals there, but your children are into dinosaurs, so you can just change the whole, setup to a dinosaur provocation. So there's a lot of ways that you can extend, like look for inspirations really to create inspiring provocations in your classroom.
Yeah, and I think it really is more about like doing trial and error and extending on what they already know and like constructing and deconstructing their ideas um, to see what works, doesn't work. Um, yeah.
And I think you might be looking for benefits of this, like why does it benefit your child to have provocations in your classroom?
Yeah, I think encouraging curiosity and inquiry. Provocations often ignite children's natural curiosity. Presenting them with the different elements and things like that.
And it also promotes critical thinking because engaging with the provocations requires children to think critically. So they will stop and look at it and say, what can I do with this right now? And sometimes they will come up with things that you didn't even think of. And your intentions with that provocation could be completely different. And I think that's the beauty of it because you see that they'll come up with something completely different than what you firstly intended for.
Yeah, and I think social and emotional development is another amazing benefit from provocations. They often include collaborative activities where the children interact and share ideas and negotiate roles. So these social interactions, they obviously help children to develop, their essential social skills such as communication, cooperation, empathy, and conflict resolution. Um, Engaging in group activities can boost children's confidence and self-esteem as they successfully contribute to the shared projects as well.
Yeah, I think it's about activating that part of their brain as well that is about problem solving. Because I think if we really think about um, what children engage with outside of uh, like a provocation or what they're doing at home, and there's a lot of like technology and things like that, and it reduces that activation of actually having to think, like everything that they're getting, even including toys, all the thought process is taken out. So there's no, pulling it apart. How does it work? Recreating it into something different, and that trial and error and trying to figure out, what else could this be?
And like it does challenge them because even if children are using magnet tiles, for example, instead of you can use photos of some famous landmarks and encourage them to try to build it, the same reproduce the same structure using magnet tiles and push them further. There's a beautiful provocation to have and can that's actually an example of something I did with my children in the classroom when they were all really interested in learning about Australia, and we talked about Sydney and the Opera House and all these different places. And then I used photos of the Opera House and the Sydney Bridge, and I just put it on the mat next to the magnet tiles and encouraged them to build. And they came up with the most amazing construction.
Yeah, and like from that, it's kind of like you can look at what is it made of? Is the foundation strong? What did they start with? Like, they didn't just start building, they did a drawing,
Yeah.
you've got mathematics in there. Like there's so many things you can draw from having a provocation that really, sparks to think outside of the box.
Yeah, I used to have a provocation book in my classroom that was just full of like pictures, just random pictures, and it might be, a ladybug on a leaf with some raindrops or things like that. And, sometimes if the children were, the children would just be sitting there and they'd be flicking through the book and they would be discussing like just what's going on in there. And it was a great opportunity to, ask those open-ended questions to really, you know, guide that critical thinking and discovery. Like, it could also lead off into a topic where they want to learn more. And yeah, it's
And I think by having books like this or photos, like I said too, you are enhancing their creativity because you're involving open-ended materials and but giving them scenarios that's allowing for multiple interpretations and solutions, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the picture of the ladybug, I mean, they could literally talk about the rain. You might be thinking they're going to talk about the ladybug, but actually they're going to talk about the rain and how rain's made, or things like that.
And it introduces them into different perspectives.
Yeah.
So one child's perspective, another child's perspective, and how different they can be, like when looking at something like that. So it's important to have those kind of skills as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that this word came up from probably Reggio inspired centers like Reggio Emilia um, approach in Italy because Loris Malaguzzi was the founder of the Reggio Emilia approach, and he really emphasized the role of the environment as a third teacher. That's why I use provocations, because he does believe that the environment should be telling the children what to do with the resources, and the setting has to be telling them. For example, the way you place your furniture in the classroom is telling you. If you leave it really open, it's telling that that's a place where you can walk freely or you can run through it. But if the furniture is actually guiding the environment in a way that is saying, it's saying that this is a quiet place, or this is what you do with this provocation, it's kind of like not saying just there's only one way to play with that provocation, but it's telling you in this area here, I want you to explore these resources in this way. Because in Reggio inspired centers, provocations are used to create environments that promote and provoke thought and inquiry. And Loris Malaguzzi believed that the children are capable and competent learners who construct their own knowledge through exploration and interactions with their surroundings.
Yeah, I think Piaget's theory of cognitive development, it also highlights the importance of hands-on exploratory learning experiences. According to him, children learn best when they can manipulate materials and engage in active experimentation. So provocations, obviously, providing lots of sensory motor and cognitive activities that support the developmental stages.
So I think a really easy way to start with provocations is by collecting a whole lot of loose parts and having, a lot of open-ended material that children can build with. And, it can be even just like having, cups, some ping pong balls, some
Cardboard boxes.
the really random things that you put together. And it's so interesting when you put those things out and how they build with it, because there's no prerequisite that they have on how that should be used. So when a child comes to that, they're not thinking, well, it's a cup and I drink out of it. They, go into their own exploration with this new material, and bringing things in that do look different, or things that they may not just come across all the time. I think it's really important to expand their horizons of what, different materials and what things are made of, and you know, that type of thing.
How they can be used differently.
And
Like your cups, you could literally put with the dinosaur provocation and see what the children do with it. It could end up being a home for them, or it could be a volcano, or like there's so many different ways that the children could extend.
And I think the provocations go to any classroom, really, to any age group. Like years ago, I used to work with in the babies room, and I set up my whole classroom full of open-ended resources. So I had one. There was a transparent corner where I put everything there that was like recycling and everything that was transparent in there. Then I had another corner that was all black stuff. So I had black rubber, lots of different things that babies that were safe for babies to play with. And then I had another one that was very rough. So I had like sandpaper. I had lots of different materials that were really rough as well. And then I had another one that it was full of cardboard. So anything that was made of cardboard was in that corner. And seriously, I've never seen the babies get like so engaged rather than having all these different even wooden materials or plastic or anything that sometimes people have in the classroom, having that whole classroom, set up with random things. The children were so engaged because, like, first of all, they were not used to being given all these materials. Like, I had a corner that was actually like an aluminum metal kind of corner too. So they had pans, cooking pans, and like spoons and all these different things that could make all these different things because they had different temperatures too. Like some of cold, the other ones were, like they could test it, they put in their mouths, everything was safe, was easy to sterilize, and they had a blast. It was a whole year full of provocations like that with open-ended resources in the baby's room with children from 6 weeks to 2 years old. It was amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I think there's like some simple steps on how you can set up a provocation, and to start with, it is like taking note of the children's interests and what they want, like what's driving their play and exploration, and where you want to go with that, and then deciding on that specific provocation with your children. And if it's something like construction or dramatic play, or it can be multiple things. And then lastly, like just creating like provoking questions would be, to extend on their thinking and their thoughts and ideas. Yeah.
And that would obviously be the open-ended questioning,
Yeah.
What do you think you could do with that? Or how do you think that was made? Or, those type of questions, the open-ended.
Yeah.
And seek the support, like we said. Do your research, Pinterest, Google, Facebook groups, Instagram pages, like your colleague. There are some people that are really creative too that's working with you if you don't feel like you're creative enough for that. There are many ways that you can actually research and find support with uh, provocations, with setting up the provocations.
I actually think like provocations are also an awesome one to do for those that aren't that creative.
Yeah.
Because if you just provide the children with resources, like just put some resources out on the mat or things like that, they are the ones that become creative. It's them that, so it's actually a really easy tool to use if you aren't a creative person.
Yeah, and I think like recently we sort of were teaching our educators how to set up a provocation, and the children really interested in machinery and construction and that kind of thing. So we started off with a table that had construction and open-ended questions and provoking that, and it ended up sort of taking over the whole of the half the classroom. But we didn't have all the resources, and the way that we collected the resources was reaching out to the community on Facebook pages and talking to families about, can you bring in some trucks and some bulldozers and books. And so I think sometimes you don't have to have all the fancy things to be able to create this, and recycled materials is generally like one of your best things you can have for a provocation, because it is so open-ended. And yeah, so
they can make those things. They can make the trucks. They can make the bulldozers. They can do all of that.
Yeah, but trying to think of ways that you can
incorporate
outreach and
community input.
The more outside the box you think, the better.
Yeah,
like it's yeah.
And I think that we can even finalize with this quote by Howard Gardner. And he says that anything that is worth teaching can be presented in many different ways. These multiple ways can make use of our multiple intelligences.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Collaborative Approach in Education. Join us next time for some more insightful discussions on this important sector. Until then, keep inspiring young minds. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with future episodes. If you have any feedback or any topics you would like us to discuss, please let us know in the comments below.